Oh, you don't need that, or you do need that? Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm joined by Lieutenant Governor Diane Primavera and, of course, Budget Director Mark Ferrandino. Of course, they're on the record for questions, and Mark Ferrandino will have, I'm sure, all the technical answers you need, and if not, we will get them for you. Over the last few years, we worked hard to build a safe, affordable, sustainable Colorado, and the focus of this budget is really maintaining the progress we've had and making sure that we can tighten our belts and deliver fiscal responsibility, more government efficiency, and meet those commitments around continuing to fully fund our schools and investments in public safety. So, these are the things we've implemented. We're continuing, of course, to make good on our promises in this tight budget environment. A lot of people ask, so why? What's going on? There's basically two main things with this budget. One is inflation has come way down. So last year, inflation was about 5%. This year, it's 2.5%. So that's from a high of 8%. So the budget growth is coming down to inflation, so 2.5%. So that's a much tighter scenario. The other that you're aware of is Medicaid costs have been higher than expected. And that was really due to the sort of unprecedented, Medicaid expansion roll-off and what happened. And the number of people is about what was projected, but the caseload is higher. While we expect inflation, and we hope inflation remains low, and that remains an ongoing factor, because that's a good thing that inflation's low. We don't want it high just to help the budget. We want it low for people. We'll deliver. We do expect that we will successfully bend the cost curve on some of those Medicaid increases. So those are not to be a feature of every budget going forward. It's possible it will cost more than we might have thought a few years ago, but it won't be at these levels. So we have a number of different proposals to rein in those costs, and of course do expect and hope that inflation remains low. This is basically what we have to do in balancing. So $391 million is the amount of growth that we have in the budget. That's the inflation amount minus statutorily required changes. So that's much lower than the last few years. We had $500, $600, $700 million growth in the past. Then we have $622 million caseload increase, capital, policies, operating reserves. So there's $638 million that we have to deliver on balancing proposals for this budget to achieve the balanced budget we have, of course, with 15% reserves, fiscal responsibility. So there is a lot of belt tightening across these different areas. This is the verbal explanation of what that last graph was. $391 million available. All the different things we need to do, therefore about $640 million in balancing. We want to also deliver these savings on an ongoing basis, because we're not just interested in fully funding our schools one year. As an example, we want to make sure we're preparing the state budget for delivering on these promises over many years, including implementing the new School Finance Act to better fund students in need. Our goals: making Colorado one of the 10 safest states, investing in education, implementing sensible reforms, saving people money, physical and behavioral health, and of course, maintaining the reserves, fiscal integrity, and driving government efficiency really wherever we can find the savings. Making Colorado one of the 10 safest states, we want to continue to support a lot of the items that we've done. We've now had 2 years of crime going down. It's also been about 2 years since we started to make state investments in this area. We feel that's absolutely critical. We, for instance, targeted $13 million in the last 2 years to target auto theft. I'm proud to say that auto theft is down 33% statewide. Catalytic converter theft in Denver is down 95%. Violent crimes are down 15% in the past year. Property crime down 25%. So we want to make sure we can invest in critical public safety infrastructure that we need to make Colorado safer. That includes adding youth beds for in youth services, supporting community-based organizations, a data-driven model to reduce crime among youth, preventing crime through the physical improvements. That's the safer streets. That means lights, fencing, cameras, all of those things that have been demonstrated by different areas. When you target them in those high crime areas, they're able to remove those hot spots and really help local police get a handle on reducing crime. The next area of focus, and I would add, by the way, just like anything, let me go back to this one. None of this includes what might happen on Tuesday. Right? So there's a number of different ballot initiatives on Tuesday. None of those are factored into this budget. That's the statutory our requirement to deliver a budget under the status quo that balances. So there are two in this area that we will incorporate in our January letter. There's the Prop KK and KK and 130, I believe. Those are the two in this area. But all of the ballot initiatives will be addressed in January, but this is separate and distinct from that. Strengthening schools, that's really our priority. I think we share that with Democratic and Republican leadership. We share that with the JBC. We share that, frankly, with the people of Colorado who want to fully fund our schools. And we were able to achieve that last year. And we want to make sure that we can continue to fully fund our schools, that we don't open up a new budget stabilization factor. And in addition, begin implementation of the new school finance formula. So this budget proposes sensible, long overdue changes to the pupil count methodology by doing what 41 states already do, which is funding current year enrollment. We fully fund the budget stabilization factor. We begin implementation of 10% of the new School Finance Act with a plan to deliver that in full over 7 years. We're excited to really be able to maintain these commitments, and not just for 1 year, but show a path to how the state can continue to fully fund our schools for the foreseeable future. Obviously, if there are major recessions, but we want to make sure that absent minor downturns, even with minor downturns, we're able to continue on this very important commitment to fund our schools. We continue our commitment to saving families money on early childhood education. We're now in the second year of universal preschool. Almost 40,000 kids are able to benefit from that. Colorado has gone from 28th to 8th in preschool enrollment, saving families $6,100 a year. We're excited to really build, again, additional services for birth to 4 and continue that work on the successful implementation of universal preschool. On higher education, we want to give the same 2.5% raises consistent with inflation to folks who work in higher education, support better transfers. This has been a policy issue of ours we've been working on, making sure that people get credit for courses they've taken. They get associates when they're due them, even if it's across several institutions. So we're trying to continue that work to make that all better, to make sure that people get their credential and credit for the work that they've already done. We continue to advance physical and behavioral health. Again, this is the area where the Medicaid caseload was higher than expected, and we want to bend that curve, and we want to adjust some of the additions that were added last year. We also want to support counties in enrolling in eligibility processing for Medicaid. Our state is a state where the counties do the work. We have $44.5 million to support counties in their work, $5.2 million to expand the capacity of mental health transitional living homes, $3.2 million to expand access to behavioral health, and $2 million showing the success of our reduction of the competency wait list. We're now saving $2 million from scaling back the private hospital beds due to CDHS's successful work there. A lot of what we did this budget is we really tried to drive government efficiency everywhere and anywhere we could find it. We challenged our agencies. We went out and we found things that we could cut to make government more efficient. That includes cutting 1% of personnel services and operating expenses line at different agencies, repealing and eliminating or consolidating a number of different task force and commissions, saving $500,000 on hospitality education grant, $800,000 on school mental health assessment. These are just examples, but really we went through the budget and tried to find different things we could cut that add up to real savings, and can make sure that we can honor our major commitments. Okay, there we go. Balancing proposals. So to achieve balance, there's a number of big things we do. I mentioned kind of all of the small things, the belt tightening, driving government efficiency. That adds up to a good amount. But we also need to do some big things, and those include sweeping interest from a number of cash funds, putting a cap on cash fund interest going forward. So these are kind of structural reforms. A lot of money in the past has been swept from cash funds on a regular basis, but we want to do this in a more predictable, formulaic way. We look forward to working with JBC to do that. That includes restructuring severance tax distributions, removing volatility from the operational fund. That'll increase the general fund again. We've swept it in previous years, but we want to create a predictable, formulaic way of making sure we honor the commitments of the severance tax fund and that it can contribute in a predictable way to the general fund. We're also sweeping some one-time funds that we found, including $29 million from electrifying school buses. We got additional federal funding in that area, so we're able to sweep those one-time funds to higher and better use. We also feel that we can do a much better job managing the state's financial assets. So this is a multi-year effort, but one thing we want to do this year is work on getting a higher rate of return for different cash funds and being able to use that to benefit controlled maintenance costs, in this case from higher ed. Also, we want to make sure that we can get better and higher use from the state asset of Pinnacle. Pinnacle has been struggling with regard to how they can engage with employers in a changing world. They can't write out-of-state policies for location-independent workers, even if Colorado companies. So as we do that, we want to make sure that we can future-proof and reform Pinnacle. That also will help contribute to PARA to shore up our retirees, as well as to the general fund as we recognize value, we say over 5 years, at least 5 years from that, to help provide some stability to the state's budget needs. We also want to maintain, and we will maintain, this budget reserve of 15%. Which is a healthy budget reserve because of the great economic uncertainty that could exist. I would highlight that most of our balancing proposals are ongoing. That's very important. Again, we certainly looked for and found one-time funds like the $29 million for electrifying school buses, but to provide balance over time, fully fund our schools, fund our healthcare responsibilities, we really look to find ongoing savings. And so most of what you see in here does represent that. To avoid kicking the can down the road, we want to provide a stable budget for several years, obviously dependent on the economy, but we want to provide a pathway to continue to do that work over several years. Part of maintaining that fiscal responsibility is making sure that any tax credit package that the state legislature does is balanced, meaning it doesn't have add any net cost. We can't have new tax credits without offsetting by reducing other tax credits. And so we do have where we are bringing forward some changes in tax credits, but they're revenue neutral, meaning for every dollar you roll on, you roll off a dollar, and we want to make sure we're happy to work with the legislature on, if they have others, on finding others to offset it, but making sure that we don't. We're about $180 million above the Tabor budget cap after the senior homestead exemption. It could be a little bit more in the future, but the point is, we're just a small downturn away from being under the Tabor cap. Now, of course, in a major recession or downturn like 2008, you're going to be under the Tabor cap. But we want to make sure that we don't go under and have to cut schools and healthcare in a minor downturn. And to do that, we need to make sure that we don't have net new tax expenditures. And so our package is offset, and we'll look forward to working with the legislature to make sure that anything we do in that realm is offset. So that's a summary of the budget, and happy to answer any of your questions. I know a lot of it's very technical. I have Mark Ferrandino here, and of course, Dan Primavera, the head of our Office of Saving People Money on Healthcare, is also available.
Yeah, I want to ask a question that I think a couple of us has. The word TF funds, what is TF?
Total
That's
funds.
total funds.
Total funds. Sorry.
Between
Yeah.
general, federal, total funds. Yeah, sorry.
The Pinnacle conversion, is that selling Pinnacle to a private, converting that to private?
It's converting it and recognizing the value. So we want to make sure that we feel, and I know Pinnacle feels that they, under the status quo, they will have a harder and harder time fulfilling their goal and their mission as an insurer of last resort. Not a crisis this year, but that is the trajectory over the next several years. We want to make sure we shore it up by allowing them to compete with others. Most states have already undertaken this kind of effort, and being able to consolidate that, not selling it to a separate owner. It's more just moving it to the private sector with a board structure and a regulatory structure that makes sense for the beneficiaries. Is in the best interest of the policyholders, but also very helpful to the state budget. Because effectively what we would do is put some of those revenues in PARA to basically offset the general fund contribution to PARA, but then go above and beyond that. So it's a way to shore up PARA in a tough budget year and contribute to the general fund for a period of at least 5 years, probably some ongoing component for the foreseeable future. In our budget, we show 105 or 100? $100 million. We believe that that's a dollar amount that's sustainable for 5 years. So it's not a 5-year budget, but we would expect about $100 million in benefits for 5 years is our estimate, and we include $100 million in this budget for balancing.
Governor,
Yeah.
Can you talk some more about the sweeping of the interest from the cash fund
Yeah.
to the general fund? And I guess, does that
Yeah, so historically, cash funds have received about 1 to 1.5% interest. Last year alone, the cash funds received basically 3 years of interest given the higher rates, and we're not touching that. We're leaving that there for them to do and be able to use. And most, when we look at forecasting, we don't forecast that significant of interest. We're forecasting usually the revenue. Interest is usually above and beyond what they're looking at to expend. It does give them a little breathing room. But then we're looking at this year and next year's interest to sweep those and then cap it moving forward so it can be more predictable. But we feel like that allows them to still have the funds because we gave them basically the 3 years in that 1 year, and then to take these 2 years and then have a more predictable path in the future.
And the word I was looking for Pinnacle, Marianne, is it's spinning them off. So it's not selling them, it's spinning them off. That's what I was trying to say. Next questions?
Governor, can you go back to the cap fund or the
Which one?
bed cap?
Yeah, youth, very important.
And talk about that a little.
Yeah, so is it 22 beds?
Does that
22 and
correlate with auto theft? I know they were kind of mentioned in the same breath.
So no, this is the issue where you have people that are often 16 or 17, and the parents are at wit's end and aren't able to take them at home in a safe way, and it's a question of where they go. We immediately want to move forward with 22 new beds, and the 2-year plan is to add 17 above and beyond that. Right now, we're very alarmed that there are 16 and 17-year-olds often released to their parents or foster parents in ways that are unsafe for the family, unsafe for the child, and dangerous for the community.
Governor, how much do you expect to put towards this new tax credit for film festivals?
That is about 3 to 5 million a year. It's 3 million ongoing. I think it's a little bit higher for a few years. That is like what we did for Quantum. It's conditional. This is the discussion of attracting Sundance. There's no film tax credit if we don't get Sundance, but we need the film tax credit to be able to successfully compete to get the Sundance Festival. Economic impact well over $100 million a year, well worth the 3 to 5 million in tax credits that, by the way, will also benefit local Denver and Boulder film festivals that might otherwise be affected by Sundance. So it's really to support that ecosystem and community. Tourism in Colorado for 2 weeks in January, over $100 million of economic activity. We're very excited to work with the legislature to be able to successfully attract Sundance to Colorado. And that's offset in our package of tax credits. Yes?
Can you talk about what you're doing with the school finance formula?
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to spread it out over 7 years instead of 6.
That's correct.
How much does that reduce the amount that would be put into the school finance formula this year?
So what we did is, kind of aligned it more to state finances so we can meet this commitment, which means 10% this year. And what we do is we go back and forward between 20% and 10%. In assessment years, we do 20%. In non-assessment years, we do 10 to be able to deliver 100% in 7 years. This had been discussed, if you recall, when the bill was being discussed. Is it 8 years? Is it 7? Is it 4? They did 6. And looking at state finances and being able to want to deliver and honor and implement it, we feel the best pathway is 7, and also taking into account which years we have assessments and which years we don't. So 10% this year, and then it goes back and forth between 20 and 10 to full implementation.
So it's not actually less this year, it's just.
No, I think it might have been. What was it?
Would have
gonna
been
be?
18%.
It would have been 18, but it wasn't. It didn't go up. Then it'll be technically more the following year, so it'll be 20 instead of 18. But it wasn't thought out about how we're actually going to do it. I mean, it was to a certain extent, but we have to align it with when we have assessment periods, the bigger increases. So yes, it goes from 18 to 10, but then the next year will be 20 instead of 18.
Governor, this 1% cut to personnel.
Yes.
Will that lead to job cuts in state government, or where is this money coming from?
Yeah, so that's paired with, and I think it's on the slide, it's paired with more flexibility for the agencies. So we really drove our agencies hard to say, can we take a across-the-board cut on the personnel and operating line? And the answer was, not that they love it, but yes, we can, as long as we have more flexibility on how to spend the money. So it's a 1% cut, but it also increases their flexibility to be able to use it. That 1% is well within vacancy savings, other things that agencies do. So there's not any cut to personnel. It's possible that some agencies might choose to delay hiring, as an example, in that area. Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, I think as we're looking at combining both our operating line items and their personal service line items, and someone who used to run a department, that flexibility allows you to cover different costs. And so by doing that, we felt with working with the departments, and we excluded ones that were really concerning, that 1% would allow them to continue operations by increasing their flexibility without impacting what they're delivering.
And the state employees will still get the raise?
Yeah, this does not impact the agreement, 2.5 plus steps. That is all within the budget.
Yeah, that's all the wins agreement. And I think this is important because, look, there's, again, balancing and cuts in this budget, and it's challenging, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's higher ed. And it wouldn't be fair to say, and the state, and agencies and workers aren't doing their part. So we want to make sure that everything is, we're consolidating, eliminating some boards and commissions that I appoint. We're cutting the agency's operating and personnel by 1%. So we're really tightening the belt however we can, both because it contributes money to the general fund, which we need to do, but also because we want to show that we too have skin in the game.
Governor, could you elaborate on the cuts to Medicaid provider rate? You acknowledging that it was something that the
Yeah.
JDC was a lot harder to increase last year.
So first of all, there's not an across-the-board cut. We hold that, but what we do instead is targeted cuts, and most of those, and I'll let Mark go into the details, but it's undoing part of the cuts it's undoing part of the additions above and beyond what they added last year. So I'll let Mark. There's really 2 or 3 big ones. So I'll
Yeah.
mention them.
Thanks. So last year, the Joint Budget Committee went above and beyond both in some areas, their staff recommendations and our proposal. For example, adult dental, we're rolling back about a third to half of that increase, which put us way above where other payers are in that area. The behavioral health beds and the PHBT line items. But those they went above, and that was the conversation last year, if you include Nebraska or not. We're asking to roll that back. And then on the MPRAC, or the rates, MPRAC tries to get everyone up to 100% of peers. We're moving that down to 95% for peers, because we think that's more sustainable as we work to try and look at other controls, and then we can reevaluate that. And that's most of where those provider rates targeted come from.
So just to put it, so we avoided an across-the-board cut to provider rates by instead looking at targeted cuts in areas that roll off what we might say are some of the excess increases of the last year or two.
Governor, with, Medicaid providers struggling with the unwind
Yeah.
on top of this, is there any money in there that's going to kind of help them get through?
Yeah, well, yes. There's over $40 million to counties to enroll people in Medicaid effectively. So, in our state is a state where the counties do this work, and we want to enroll eligible people in Medicaid. And so, with the unwind, we want to make sure that counties are better positioned to successfully do that work.
Governor, I don't know if this is a better question for you or Mark. I was wondering about the $640 million in budget balancing, because my understanding was that the gap was higher than that due to some of the Medicaid issues.
I'll let him address it. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's a current year and there's a next year. This is next year's budget. There is a gap in you want to address this?
Yeah. So it's always a hard thing. How do you explain a budget and show all the numbers? For example, when we showed the budget in September and we talked about the plus $1 billion, we looked at historical increases, whether it's capital, whether it's operating, and we have reduced those. So those aren't showing up. So for example, we usually spend $300 to $400 million in capital. We're proposing $180 roughly million in capital. So that is part of how we did it. So it's by not including those costs, we're able to just make the hole not as big as we would have otherwise when we were showing what averages were historically.
So we're doing all the controlled maintenance, category 1 that's needed. There's a few other items on there, but yes, less capital investment than, and by the way, there was a bigger capital budget in other years that I've been governor. So we were able to use levers like that. And so those are technically not part of balancing because it's purely discretionary. I mean, you could argue category 1 maintenance might not be fully discretionary, but we do fully fund that and go above that. But that's why that's not included in that figure.
Governor, would you mind addressing the current controversy in the Secretary of State's office? Has she remedied that problem with the release of passwords? And, you know, what do you say to state Republicans who are calling for her resignation?
Well, I was very relieved that she asked for and was willing to receive our help in getting those passwords changed. We were able to utilize state planes to get to remote areas of our state. It's my understanding all the passwords were updated as of just after midnight last night. And again, thanks to the multi-factors that are required for access, the passwords that were leaked were not sufficient or in any way useful to compromise the system. That needs to be coupled with the passwords that the locals have and physical presence in a badged and restricted area. But that potential opening has been closed, and it's my understanding that the logs have been downloaded to be able to ensure that no modifications or tampering has occurred. Was there one more budget question over there? Yes.
Yeah, general budget question.
Yeah.
You mentioned this is kind of a belt-tightening year. How do you expect typical Coloradans to feel these cuts
Yeah.
or not?
Well, I mean, look, sure, most Coloradans are kind of excited that inflation is way down. So it's just different worlds, right? So inflation is way down to 2.5%. That is, Coloradans are excited because when prices were going up 5%, 7%, it was very frustrating. Groceries, clothes, gas is at a low. These are all coming down. So for the state budget, that makes it challenging, but for Coloradans and their checkbooks, it makes it better. So it's just kind of two different things sometimes. We've preserved, we believe, again, we listen a lot, we hear from people, the core values that Coloradans have, keep full funding of our schools, we do that. Investments in public safety to make Colorado one of the safest states, we do that. Of course, there's other challenges to the state and there's other cuts that different people won't love. But again, in general, I think people are very excited that inflation has come down so much. And also at a time when economic growth is strong, unemployment is low, along with inflation coming down. Thank you all very much. Take care.